Good afternoon. This is Judge Martinez Tenredo. We are here in the matter of Dakota Wares versus Lush Fertilizer Incorporated. Case number is 2021 CV 303720. Today is February 5th, 2022, and we are live. Are the plaintiffs ready for to start the trial?
Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiffs are ready.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. And is the defense ready to start this trial?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. So first of all, I would like to make sure that the scoring panelists do have a copy of the rosters. I'm assuming they do. If you do not, make sure that you look in the chat. They should be there. Just so that you know, I don't do recesses during the trial, except for right before closing statements. I'll give the parties a minute or two to get things together and start that closing. It just also a reminder, if you have any disputes arising out of the competition that you need to report, you do it inside the bar. Otherwise, you do an outside the bar complaint to the Bar Association directly. Timekeepers. Let me see, it says peony timekeeper, but I don't know your name. I like to know everybody's name.
Yes, Your Honor. My name is Leah Blake.
Leah Blake.
Yes.
Thank you, Ms. Blake. And the timekeeper for the other team is Daisy. Who is the timekeeper for Daisy?
Your Honor, we don't have a timekeeper, unfortunately. We only have 6 members of our team, but we can all individually keep track of our time. And if the other team would like, they can also, if they wouldn't mind keeping track of our time just to double check, that would be great.
Your Honor, we also can keep track of the other team's time. We actually have 2 people timing, Leah Blake, and my name is Meg Stanitsky. And we can also share screen for both teams as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I appreciate your willingness to do that.
Thank you.
That's wonderful. I appreciate it. So thank you, Megs. Thank you, Leah. I'll keep you front and center on my screen so that I can see your timekeeping as well. Just a reminder as well, compliance with time will be adhered to, except with that exception that we just talked about. Let's go ahead and have each of your teams. I'd like to know which team is the plaintiff and which team is the defense. So what team is Peony?
Peony is plaintiff, Your Honor.
Thank you. And so Daisy is defense. Thank you. I just want to make sure that I have the correct roster up. I appreciate that. Okay, so let's go ahead and proceed with the swearing in. First of all the team members, attorneys and witnesses, as well as timekeepers, could you turn on your videos and raise your right hand? And I'm missing the timekeepers. Excellent, thank you. Do you promise that the presentation you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the facts and rules of the mock trial competition? Thank you. And witnesses, attorneys and timekeepers, you can lower your hands. Witnesses, keep your hand raised. Do you witnesses promise that the testimony you are about to give will faithfully and truthfully conform to the witness statements, that you will not add material facts or opinions which are not contained in the case problem, and that you will follow the rules and procedures of the mock trial competition. Thank you. We are live, so I'm going to ask the gallery members to raise their right hand. And obviously we're virtual, so we can't see that. But this is an honor thing. Do you promise to represent yourselves as positive role models and to behave in a manner that exemplifies ethical and professional sportsmanship during and after the mock trial round? And I'm going to assume that everybody does. Now, the scoring panelists, if you could turn on your videos and raise your right hand. Thank you. Do you promise to adjudicate the mock trial competition as fairly and objectively as possible in accordance with the facts and procedures and rules of the mock trial competition? Thank you. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. First of all, I'd like to do introductions. If the plaintiffs, who would like to introduce themselves first?
I'll reintroduce myself first, Your Honor.
Excellent, Ms. Walsh. Would you please give me an introduction? And I'm going to caution you, if you, sometimes everybody goes so fast, we can't, it's hard for us on the panels or the presiding judges to hear and process who you are. So take it slowly. Don't rush. There's no hurry.
Of course, Your Honor.
Excellent.
Good evening, Your Honor, or afternoon, I suppose. Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Ella Walsh. I use she, her pronouns, and I will be representing the plaintiff in the case Dakota Weirs versus Lush Fertilizer Incorporated. I will be conducting the direct examination of Dr. Casey Rogers, as well as the cross-examination of Dr. Devin Williams. Permission for my co-counsel to introduce themselves?
Absolutely. Proceed.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, opposing counsel. My name is Ahmad Dar. I will be conducting the direct examination of Ms. Carson Durst, the cross-examination of Skylar Weirs, as well as delivering the closing statement.
Thank you, Mr. Dar. Good afternoon to you as well.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Kai Wong, and today I will be conducting the direct examination of Mr. Dakota Weirs, as well as the cross-examination of Blake Doncourt. And I will also be presenting the plaintiff's opening statement. Permission for our witnesses to introduce themselves?
Yes, Mr. Wong. Good afternoon to you as well.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Charlie Jones. I use he, him pronouns, and today I am Dakota Weirs.
Good afternoon, Mr. Weirs.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is Lily Biederman. I use she, her pronouns, and today I am Carson Durst.
Good afternoon, Ms. Durst.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury and opposing counsel. My name is David Varholak. I use he, him pronouns, and today I am Dr. Casey Rogers.
Good afternoon, Dr. Rogers. Would the defense like to introduce themselves?
Yes, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the jury. My name is Arusla Mabera, an attorney representing the defendant Lush Fertilizer, and today I will be delivering the opening statement, conducting the direct examination of Devin Williams, and conducting the cross-examination of Carson Durst.
Good afternoon, Ms. Abera.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the jury. My name is Katie Jack, an attorney representing the defendant Lush Fertilizer, and today I will be conducting the direct examination of Blake Doncourt and the cross-examination of Dakota Weirs.
Good afternoon, Ms. Jack.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, members of the jury. My name is Maria Cook, an attorney representing the defendant Lush Fertilizer, and today I will be delivering the closing arguments, conducting the direct examination of Skylar Weirs and the cross-examination of Casey Rogers. Permission for our witnesses to introduce themselves.
Yes, Ms. Cook, thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the jury. My name is Josie Mace Brown, and today I'm Blake Doncourt.
Good afternoon, Ms. Blancourt.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the jury. My name is Annika Reeder-Holman, and today I am Skylar Weirs.
Good afternoon, Ms. Weir.
Good afternoon, Your Honor, and members of the jury. My name is Sophia Fury, and I will be Dr. Devin Williams.
Good afternoon, Dr. Williams. Thank you all for your introductions. Is the plaintiff ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiff is ready to proceed.
Do you have at this time actually, let me ask, is the defense ready to proceed?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Mr. Wong, do you have any pretrial issues that need to be addressed before we get started?
Yes, we do, Your Honor. However, I will not be delivering the pretrial matters. That will be my co-counsel, Ella Walsh.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Walsh?
May I proceed?
You may.
Thank you. Your Honor, we request that the crossing attorney keep their camera on throughout the duration of the direct examination and the direct attorney throughout the duration of the cross.
Yes, and I actually prefer that. I have asked that in other trials as well. So if that can happen, that would be great.
Thank you, Your Honor. We request that we may reserve remaining time from the closing argument for rebuttal.
And rebuttal time will be reserved if there is any left over. Yes.
Thank you. We ask that the timer be the one screen sharing exhibits once they are admitted as evidence.
Okay. So Peony, I'm sorry, it was Leah and Meg. Do you have the capacity to share exhibits when the plaintiff's attorneys require them?
We do, Your Honor. We have all the exhibits with us.
I would really appreciate if you could do that for us.
Yeah,
Thank
no
you
problem.
both. Okay, excellent. Much appreciated. Okay. Any other pretrial matters?
Yes, a couple more, Your Honor.
You may proceed, Ms. Walsh.
We ask that in the case of technical difficulties, such as difficulty screen sharing or a disconnection, that time be paused for both sides until the matter is resolved.
Absolutely. Time will be paused. If that's difficult and the parties do not agree, just let me know and I will make a decision about timing.
Thank you, Your Honor. Given the virtual nature of this trial, we also ask permission to sit or stand according to personal preference.
And that's my preference. I was standing all for the other two trials and now I'm sitting and I'd like to stay that way. So I'm not surprised that you would as well. So you may proceed as you feel comfortable. And it's better not to have to move cameras and so forth.
Thank you, Your Honor. And finally, we ask that all rights afforded to the plaintiff are also afforded to the defense.
I'm sorry, Ms. Walsh, I didn't understand that. What would be afforded?
Any rights afforded to the plaintiff, such as the timekeeper sharing the exhibits, would also be offered to the defense.
Oh, absolutely. That'll take place as well. Not a problem. Any other pretrial matters, Ms. Walsh?
No, that is all for the plaintiff. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Cook, do you have any pretrial matters that need to be addressed at this time?
We have nothing further, Your Honor.
Thank you. So let's go ahead and get started. Who will be calling the first witness for the plaintiff? Actually, I apologize. Who will be doing opening statement for the plaintiff?
I will, Your Honor.
Mr. Wong, you may proceed.
Thank you. May it please the court. Dakota Weirs was a healthy young man with big dreams. He radiated positivity positivity like a sun and gave those around him both warmth and kindness. He worked hard in school and had a job. He volunteered at a community center near his home because he wanted to give back to those who had less. And people began to notice the National Honor Student. They began to notice the man who, despite working harder than everyone else, would also give back to everyone else. They noticed that when Dakota Weirs sat down at a piano, his love for his grandfather flowed from his heart and into his fingertips, and then to everyone in that room. But all of that passion and heart and love has been trapped because Lush Fertilizer chose capital over compassion. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, my name is Kai Wong, and today, alongside my co-counsel, I am representing Mr. Dakota Weirs. Mr. Weirs worked in the fertilizer industry for several years, during which time he was exposed to the chemical known as Drufo, an exposure which would change his life forever. As the plaintiff, we must prove 4 things. First, we must prove that Lush Fertilizer created the fertilizer which contained Drufo and that Mr. Weirs used. Second, we must prove that Lush Fertilizer had a duty to protect or warn its users from any possible side effects that its product might cause. Third, we must prove that Lush Fertilizer failed to protect or warn Mr. Weirs from the harmful side effects of its product. And lastly, we must prove that Mr. Weirs has suffered significant damages because of Lush's negligence. To that end, you will hear from Carson Durst, a former employee at Lush Fertilizer who worked with the company for 3 years while it was still producing Drufo. She will testify that Lush should have known about these risks, but chose to put their customers in potential danger to earn more money. You will see an email which was sent by one of Lush's supervisors, which asks employees to present their findings in a positive light. Carson will tell you that Lush left out data which they didn't like and which could pose potential harm to their customers. And lastly, Carson will tell you that the research Lush conducted on Drufo was rushed, unfinished, and should never have been put out to the public. You will hear from Dr. Casey Rogers, a professor at UC Berkeley, and he will tell you that because of a lack of sufficient studies and a shocking study performed which concluded that there was a carcinogenic effect on rats, he performed his own study on Drufo. You will learn that his study was conducted over numerous years, over a wide variety of people. And he will show you that that study points to a serious link between cancer and Drufo. You will learn that because of his interactions with Lush, Dakota was 10 times as likely as the normal person to develop non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. You will also hear from the head of Lush, Blake Doncourt, and they will admit that they willingly chose not to bake their fertilizer, which would have made their product completely safe. Completely safe, and they didn't do it. Dakota will tell you how he worked at Haven Landscaping, specifically with Lush Fertilizer. He will tell you that he was young and he was working towards his education. And while he will admit that he didn't always wear the safety equipment, you will learn that he was 14, and by reading Lush's fertilizer label, he would never have expected to develop the cancer which he suffers from today. A label that he will show you has a spelling mistake, which somehow slipped past Lush's development team. You will learn how hard Dakota's life has become post-diagnosis, how he barely has the energy to move around the house, much less move around outside. He will tell you that he would pay an endless amount of money to make this pain go away. And he will tell you that his passion for piano has been bottled up and trapped because of his illness. A passion that started when he was young, playing with his grandfather at the piano. You will learn how Dakota had a bright academic future at Juilliard, and that it was all stripped away from him, all because his illness stops him from playing the piano, all because his illness stops him from playing the greatest joy of his life. Dakota will tell you how he worries for his future, not just his academics or his piano, but for his way of life. Once you have heard all of the facts presented to you, we believe that you will find Lush Fertilizer fully liable for the cancer which our client suffers from, and that they should pay a recompensation of $11 million. Thank you, Your Honor. That's all I have.
You're muted, Judge.
I apologize. Would the defense like to do their opening statement?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed, Ms. Abeda.
Thank you. Your Honor and members of the jury, please allow me to address you on behalf of Lush Fertilizer. Lush Fertilizer is a company that has been built by Blake Doncourt brick by brick since 2000. The company has a history of happy customers. It's used by businesses, governments, and everyday people. And through the success and power that came with being the CEO of Lush Fertilizer, Blake Doncourt has been a huge activist for climate change. He has directed 10% of Lush Fertilizer's annual profits to charities working to decrease the world's global nitrogen footprint. The company has advocated for creating state and national legislation to educate on the environmental issues, and they have a charity that focuses on cleaning pollution in oceans. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, let me ask you a question. Why would a company that cares so deeply and puts so much into helping the environment ignore a known carcinogen in their own product? Today, you will hear from Blake Doncourt. Blake Doncourt will expand on how their team at Lush Fertilizer has helped the climate and the testing put into Drufo before it hit the markets. Next, you will hear from Skylar Weirs, an investigative journalist. They will explain to you why scientific skepticism is such an important thing, how Drufo keeps people safe, their relationship with their twin sibling, Dakota Weirs, and how New Haven Landscaping is the real company at fault. Lastly, you will hear from Dr. Devin Williams, who will tell us what Drufo is, what eutrophication is, and how environmentally sustainable and safe for humans Drufo is. You will also hear from Dakota Weirs, who was sadly diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. She believes Drufo and Lush Fertilizer was the cause for her disease. In reality, New Haven Landscaping's negligence in implementing safety precautions is the real one at fault. Today, Your Honor and members of the jury, you will come to understand that Drufo and Lush Fertilizer is not to blame for Dakota's illness. New Haven Landscaping knew that there were proper precautions on the back of the packaging in order to protect yourself while using the product, and allowed 14-year-old Dakota Weirs to use the fertilizer in casual clothing. With all this being said, at the end of the trial, we will ask you to make a verdict that will not unrightfully destroy the reputation of an ethical and safe fertilizer and a company owner that cares so deeply about the environment at the hands of disreputable science. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Avera. Are the plaintiffs ready to put on their case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor.
So, Mr. Wang, what I'd like to happen is that your first witness come on the screen. Oh, hold on. I have to change from speaker to gallery again. Okay, so, and that defense counsel, and that would be you, Ms. Jack. Okay, so you're all here. So hold on a second. Let me rearrange this so that I can make sense to me. Okay, Mr. Wang, you may proceed with direct examination of Mr. Weirs. Mr. Weirs, I'd like to remind you that we've already gone through the advisement and swearing in. So you may proceed, Mr. Wang.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Weirs. Would you mind saying your name and spelling your last name for the record?
Of course. My name is Dakota Weirs. That's Weirs.
And Mr. Weirs, could you tell us a brief background about yourself?
Yes. So I'm 20 years old. I was born with a twin sister, and I was recently diagnosed with a cancer known as non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
And Mr. Weirs, what sort of activities did you do prior to your diagnosis?
I really tried to be an active member of my community, and I really try to give back to those people that are less fortunate than I am. I worked at the soup kitchen near my house and the homeless shelter, and I really just wanted to give back. And I also tried to make some money at Haven Landscaping.
And Mr. Weirs, what exactly did you do at Haven Landscaping?
Well, I started working when I was pretty young. I was only 14 at the time. And so I wasn't quite old enough to work any of the heavy machinery or big enough to fit on the ride-on lawn mower and anything like that. So I was really restricted to simply spreading fertilizer.
And Mr. Weirs, how old were you again when you started working?
I was 14.
And why were you working?
I was working to fund my education. Education is something that really mattered to me at the time. And I mean, it still really matters to me today.
And were there any rules when handling fertilizer?
Yes. There were some rules. I was asked to wear, long sleeves, sometimes a mask, but yeah.
And Mr. Weirs, did you think that your work at Haven Landscaping could have caused your condition?
I mean, now, after my diagnosis, I do. I think that I worked with one fertilizer in particular, Lush fertilizer, that I think is responsible for my cancer.
And why do you think Lush?
After I was diagnosed, I could barely go out of the house. So I was watching my television one day, and a program came on, a sort of whistleblower, if you will, saying that
Objection.
Lush had.
Hearsay.
Could you elaborate, Ms. Jack?
Yes, right now the answer that's being given is talking about an out-of-court statement. And I just want to ensure that it's not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted.
Mr. Ryan, do you have a response?
Yes, Your Honor. Under Rule 801C, hearsay is an out-of-court statement given to prove the truth of the matter asserted. While this is an out-of-court statement, this is not given to prove the truth of the matter asserted that Lush fertilizer causes cancer, but rather to show why Mr. Weirs thinks it caused his cancer.
Overruled. You may go ahead and answer, Mr. Weirs.
Yes, as I was saying, this program said that perhaps Lush fertilizer held chemicals that were directly correlated to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And I had known that I used Lush, and I knew that I had non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And so I connected the dots.
And Mr. Weirs, did you connect with anyone at your old job about this possibility?
Yes, of course. I wanted to look into it as much as I could. And so I contacted my old boss, and I had him send a picture of the packaging.
And Your Honor, I would ask that the timekeeper begin to screen share what has been marked as Exhibit 1.
Leah or Meg, could you put that up, please? Thank you so much.
Mr. Weirs, do you see what's being screen shared right now?
I do.
Is this an accurate copy of the label that your boss sent you?
Yes, it is.
Did you see this label while you were working at Haven?
Yes, I did.
And is this the same label?
Yes.
Then, Your Honor, I would move to admit Exhibit 1 into evidence.
Any objections, counsel?
No objections, Your Honor.
Exhibit 1 will be admitted into evidence. You may proceed, Mr. Wong.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would also ask that Exhibit 1 be published to the jury.
It is so published.
Now, Mr. Weirs, are there any warnings on this label?
Barely. It says caution causes eye irritation. Avoid contact with eyes of clothing. I mean, it says causes eye irritation, first of all, which is, I mean, nothing, absolutely nothing compared to what I suffer from today.
And Mr. Weirs, you seemed a little hesitant while reading that description. Could you tell me why?
Yes. Sorry, it says avoid contact with eyes of clothing. And I believe it's meant to say eyes or clothing. And obviously, obviously Lush just simply didn't care enough about their warning to even double check to make sure the spelling is correct.
Objection, Your Honor. Relevance.
What's the relevance, Mr. Wong?
Your Honor, it is the defense's theory or the plaintiff's theory of the case that through its negligence, Lush Fertilizer either inadvertently caused Mr. Weirs' cancer. By focusing on the spelling mistake in their label, we are exemplifying the gross neglect that Lush had while putting this product out to market.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Very briefly, Ms. Jack.
I think it would also be improper character evidence to say that a simple spelling mistake counts as gross neglect on behalf of an entire company, and therefore they wouldn't care about cancer risk of their product. I think that's a big step.
I think that is a big step. I'm going to overrule the objection, but caution you, Mr. Wong and Mr. Weir, to not stray too far.
Yes, Your Honor.
But you can go ahead and answer, Mr. Weir. Do you recall the question?
Yes, I do. I was just simply saying that I found it quite interesting that they didn't pay any attention to the caution that they put on their packaging.
And Mr. Weirs, are there any safety recommendations?
Yes, there are some recommendations that say to wear a mask or protective wear.
Okay, thank you, timekeeper. You may stop screen sharing this exhibit. Now, transitioning back to your personal life, Mr. Weirs, what sort of effects has cancer had on your body?
Well, I mean, it's cancer, and so it's pretty much affected every part of my life. I mean, I can barely walk. I can barely get out of the house. I have trouble breathing. I have severe weight loss. My lymph nodes are hugely swollen, and I mean, the worst part is that I mean, I don't even know if I'm ever going to recover. I don't know if I'm going to die. The future is terrifying to me.
Thank you for sharing that with us, Mr. Weirs. And you mentioned earlier that education was very important to you. Does that still hold true?
Yes, of course it does. I mean, it was always my dream to go to Juilliard. I myself, I'm a pianist, and Juilliard has always been my dream. And so I worked really hard in school, and I tried to get out there as much as I could. I did extracurriculars. I was a National Honor Society student. I was part of the student government, and I was trying my best to go to Juilliard. But sadly, that opportunity has it's sort of been lost to me at this point.
And why is that?
Well, I mean, it's because of my cancer. but because I can't sit on a piano bench anymore, I can't play. I bruise so easily that I can't sit for long amounts of time, and I mean I've pretty much completely lost the ability to pursue that dream.
And Mr. Weirs, why did you start playing piano in the first place?
It really all started with my grandfather. You know, back when I was much younger, me and him would play together. I would sit on his lap and play the keys, and you know, he was a talented pianist as well. And so you know, I that's how I got into it. And as I grew older, I became better and better. And you know, when I lost my grandfather, you know, it was really hard for me, and he meant a lot to me. And so playing the piano was sort of a way to reconnect to him. It was a way for me to imagine him sitting right next to me. And you know, when I lost the ability to play, it was like losing him a second time. And that was one of the hardest parts of my condition.
Thank you for sharing that touching story with us, Mr. Weirs. And thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for this witness at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Weil. Cross-examination of this witness, Ms. Jack?
Yes, Your Honor. May I proceed?
You may proceed.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Weirs. I'd like to start by discussing your initial contact with Lush Fertilizer. You started using the fertilizer when you got your job at Haven Landscaping, correct?
Yes.
And you had that job when you were 14?
Yeah, that is when I started work.
You used multiple fertilizers during your time as a landscaper, right?
I did use multiple fertilizers, but they often had warnings on them.
Okay, but just to clarify, it's a yes that you use multiple.
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, may I have permission to share my screen of what has previously been admitted as Exhibit 1?
Absolutely.
All right, Mr. Weirs. Do you see the part underneath hazards that says keep out of reach of children?
Yes, I do.
All right, and then under user safety recommendations, it says utilize protective clothing that covers exposed skin, correct?
It does say that, but had I known that the consequences were so great, I certainly would have done things differently.
Mr. Weirs, you can have the opportunity to clarify things more in a redirect, but just stick with the yes or no answers, please. My next question is, it also says that use of a respirator or N95 mask is recommended, correct?
Recommended, yes.
Okay, and it says that users should wash hands before and after use of a product?
Yes.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen there. Now, Mr. Weirs, when you were working with Lush Fertilizer, you wore short sleeves, correct?
At times I did.
And you wore shorts?
At times, yes.
So you did not wear protective clothing when you were working with the fertilizer?
I did some of the time, but some of the time it was too hot and everybody else was not, so no.
Okay. And you didn't wear gloves?
Not always.
And you didn't wear a mask?
Once again, not always, but everybody else was not, so yeah.
Has anybody else developed your condition?
Objection, speculation.
Ms. Jack, do you have a response?
Yes, I'm talking to this person who worked in this company and knew these people well, and he just said that nobody else was wearing these protective items. So I'm just questioning whether or not they got the same condition as he did.
Mr. Weirs can testify about what he knows, and therefore I'll allow the question. Overruled.
Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
Do you know of anybody else getting your condition?
Well, first of all, as I was not allowed to use any of the machinery, I was mostly using the fertilizer, unlike other members of my team. But also, I do not know of any, but I do not know of any who have not gotten it.
So the answer is no, you don't know of any, correct?
Yes, but that also means that there could be.
All right, no further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Jack. Any redirect, Mr. Wong?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Wang. Thank you, Mr. Weir. I appreciate your testimony. You're excused. Do the plaintiffs have another witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Ms. Carson-Durst to the stand.
Thank you, Mr. Dar. Let me go ahead, before you proceed, let me go ahead and rearrange my screen here. Okay. I apologize. This is taking, it's not going to be time off of your. So, Mr. Dar, you may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ms. Darns, I would remind you that you've already taken an oath.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
May I
Mr.
proceed,
Dar.
Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Durst. Please introduce yourself to the jury.
My name is Carson Durst.
Now, could you start us off by describing your educational background?
Well, I graduated with a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from Arizona State University.
Now, Ms. Durst, where do you work?
Well, I'm the lead product developer and the head of the research and development team at Terrace Greenery and oversee the development of their fertilizers and lawn enhancement products.
Now, where did you work before joining Terrace Greenery?
Well, I was hired as an intern at Lush Fertilizer in 2003 and was promoted to a full-time position as product development engineer after 3 months with the company.
Now, how were you hired for this position at Lush?
Well, I was given this wonderful opportunity by company founder and CEO Blake Doncourt.
Could you elaborate on your relationship with the Doncourts?
Of course, I used to be really close with the Doncourts. They were like a second family to me. I was best friends with Blake and Morgan's oldest son, Charles. We played on the same soccer team and were practically inseparable, but that was a long time ago and we've drifted apart.
Now, going back to your work at Lush, how long did you work there?
Well, I worked there for 3 years. I started with the company in 2003 and then left in 2006.
And what did you do while you were there?
Well, I started as an intern and then was promoted to product development engineer later that year. But I was involved with the in-house studies Lush did.
Which studies were you involved in?
Well, when I joined the company, Lush was in the process of testing the safety of the bonding agent Drufo. And later that year did another study specifically on whether Drufo was carcinogenic, and I was part of the team researching both.
Could you elaborate on the first study Lush did on Drufo?
Well, during this study, they were testing the safety of Drufo, and I was tasked with the role of researching one of the chemical compounds within Drufo.
Now, how did you get started in this study?
Well, my boss, Jerry Langley, emailed me and my colleagues inviting us to take part in this study.
Did you keep this email?
Yes, I printed it out in September of 2003 and kept it until now.
Your Honor, I ask that the timekeeper share the exhibit marked as Exhibit 4.
Leah or Meg, would you be able to do that? Thank you so much.
Let the record, apologies.
Go ahead.
Let the record
Mr. Dar.
reflect that I'm showing Ms. Durst a copy of Exhibit 4. Now, do you recognize this document?
Yes, it is the email I received from Jerry about the study in September of 2003.
Is this a fair and accurate representation of that email?
Yes, it is.
What does the email say exactly?
Well, it said that the second study that was being conducted to research the potential carcinogenic qualities that were found in Drufo. It also states that as the research development engineers, we should meet with senior management to be briefed on target market positions and economic strategies planned for Drufo.
Now, what did you take this to mean?
Well, to me, this simply implied that we should present our results and analysis in a positive light to promote the financial success of Drufo. This was also made clear during our weekly meetings.
And what did you do with your analysis once you finished the study?
Well, once we reached our conclusions, we had a final meeting to present all of our analysis and findings to my boss, Jerry, and another manager, Alex Monroe.
Now, what happened at this final meeting?
One scientist expressed concerns that not only may Drufo contain a carcinogen, but that our analysis found that it is perhaps linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Apologies, Your Honor. I believe I may have forgot to do so, but I move to admit Exhibit 4 into evidence.
Any objection, Ms. Aveda, with regard to Exhibit 4?
Yes, Your Honor. I object to hearsay.
Any response, Mr. Adar?
Yes, Your Honor. This statement is, while it is an out-of-court statement, it is not hearsay. Pursuant to Rule 801 D2D, and this is an opposing party statement, and it's offered against an opposing party and was made by the party's agent or employee on a matter within the scope of that relationship and while it existed.
The exhibit will be admitted into evidence over objection. You may proceed.
Mr. Hurst, would you, no, apologies. Now, Mr. Hurst, would you like me to repeat the previous question?
Yes, please.
Now, what happened at this final meeting you referred to?
Well, one scientist expressed concerns that not only may Drufo contain a carcinogen, but that her analysis found is perhaps linked to non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
How did Alex and Jerry react?
At the end, Alex told us to keep it in the walls until we figured out what we were doing.
Now, were your findings part of the final conclusion for these studies?
Yes, all the information that I found was included in the findings.
And what do you think about the study based on your participation in the research?
Well, I felt that there was a problem with the way that Lush was conducting research, and I voiced my opinions to some of the people higher up in the company, saying that there was research left out and Lush did not include all the data that was found in the studies.
How did the company respond to your thoughts?
Well, after I voiced my concerns about how the studies were being done, the company gave me a performance improvement plan, and I was delegated the jobs no one wanted, so I became less involved with the research Lush was doing.
And what was your response to this?
Well, at this point, I felt my career at Lush was coming to an end, and I started looking for other jobs. Luckily, Tara's Greenery had an opening for a product development engineer, and I was hired, but I did feel conflicted taking this job because of my connection with the Doncourts.
Thank you, Mr. Hurst. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you. Ms. Aveda, do you have any cross-examination of Ms. Durst?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening, Ms. Durst. Let's talk about Lush. You grew up best friends with the son of Blake Doncourt, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
And you both went to Arizona State University?
Yes.
You did well enough in school, right?
Yes, I was never top of my class, but I did do pretty well.
And you got your internship at Lush straight out of college?
Yes, I did.
It's my understanding you got this opportunity because you were complaining to Blake Doncourt's son, correct?
I applied at Lush like any other person and was hired by the company itself.
Okay. I want to move on to your position at Lush Fertilizer. The biggest assignment you got from the company was working on Drufo, yes?
That is correct.
And you were given the task of researching a specific chemical compound?
Yes.
The research was reviewed regularly, correct?
That is correct.
And they were compiled into a series of reports that was given to senior management, correct?
Yes,
You were an intern, right?
at this time I was.
So you couldn't have known what higher ups were saying.
No,
In your witness
Objection,
statement,
Your Honor. Lack of personal knowledge.
Ms. Abeda?
If she was an intern at Lush Fertilizer, there's not much way you could know what was going on.
Sustained. That testimony is stricken if it was answered before the question or the objection was lodged. You may proceed.
Well, in your witness statement, you also mentioned the falsities in the final report of the study of Drufo, correct?
yes, I do.
Did you have much access to the data analyzed by the members of the research and development team?
Well, I had access to the research that I did. And looking at the final study, I believe that even the research that I did was parts of it were left out.
Okay. So let's move on to the end of your employment at Lush Fertilizer. At some point within your employment, you started getting bad performance reviews that you believe were unfair.
Yes,
And the times you asked Blake Doncourt, they didn't intervene, correct?
I'm sorry, could you rephrase the question?
So the times that you have asked Blake Doncourt for help, they didn't intervene.
That is correct.
So eventually, in search for a new job, you applied to Terra's Greenery.
I felt that I should stay in the field that I know, which happened to be fertilizer. And Terrace Greenery was another fertilizer company.
Did you sign a confidentiality agreement while at Lush Fertilizer?
Early on in my employment, I do believe I did.
Isn't Terra's Greenery one of Lush Fertilizer's biggest competitors?
Yes, it is.
But did the NDA cause a legal battle between Lush Fertilizer and Terra's Greenery?
When I applied at Terra's, I had forgotten about this confidentiality agreement. And so when I was hired, it did cause a legal battle.
But you were eventually able to work at Terra's Greenery, right?
That is correct.
And you've been working on a new product?
Yes, I have.
The projections of this new product could outsell Lush Fertilizer, correct?
Yes, it could.
No further questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Aveda. Any redirect, Mr. Dar?
Yes, Your Honor, a brief one, if I may.
Yes, and Ms. Aveda, if you could keep on your video while testimony is still ongoing, I appreciate it. You may proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Durst, could you elaborate on the conflict you felt taking the job at Terra's Greenery?
Well, yes. Looking at my history with the Doncourts and the family connection that I did once have with them, I wasn't thrilled to personally affect Blake by taking this other job, but in the end, I did have to look out for myself.
And now, moving on. So your qualifications before you were hired for Lush, can you elaborate on those?
Yes, I wasn't always the most, how would you say, well-trained employee before I was hired at Lush. But as I was at Lush, I grew my experience and I was a very valuable employee.
Can you explain on how you moved up the ranks at Lush?
Yes, I was always outperforming the more experienced engineers, and Lush noticed my improvement and promoted me.
Thank you, Ms. Durst. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dar. Ms. Durst, you are excused. Does the plaintiff have any further witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. The plaintiff calls Dr. Casey Rogers to the stand.
And do I see that? Okay, hold on one second. Thank you. Dr. Rogers, just recall that you are under oath. You may proceed with direct examination, Ms. Walsh.
Thank you, Your Honor. Please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Dr. Casey Rogers, Rogers.
Dr. Rogers, what do you do for a living?
I'm currently employed as a professor in horticulture and entomology at the University of California, Berkeley. As part of my work, I've taught a few courses in horticulture and entomology. I also perform research with the university as part of my employment.
Would you please describe your educational background?
I received a Bachelor of Science in Agriculture and Chemistry from Colorado State University. In addition, I have a PhD in entomology from the University of California, Berkeley.
And would you please describe your professional background?
Previously, I'd worked as a research analyst for a large multinational chemical company. I've also published many scholarly articles that focus on the toxicity of chemicals, including DRUFO.
Could you please elaborate on your research?
My research has been used by administrative boards as well as used in other litigation. It has also been used as advice for companies. Currently, I'm involved with research with the Environmental Chemistry and Toxicology Laboratory. Through this research, I work with pesticides and ensure their safety on humans and other non-target species.
Now, Dr. Rogers, what is horticulture?
Well, in simple terms, horticulture is the study and the cultivation of plants.
And what is toxicology?
Toxicology is the study of adverse effects of chemical substances, and it's also the practice of diagnosing and treating exposure to toxins and toxicants.
Your Honor, the plaintiff offers Dr. Casey Rogers as an expert in horticulture, toxicology, and research analysis.
Ms. Cook, any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
Dr. Rogers will be accepted in all three fields as an expert.
Thank you, Your Honor. And Dr. Rogers, what was your first impression of DRUFO?
Due to the lack of sufficient studies on the effects of DRUFO, I initially felt as though there's need to look further into the effects of DRUFO on humans. Because I felt that DRUFO was rushed to the market, I felt as though DRUFO could be actively putting people in danger. I had also read a study that stated that DRUFO was carcinogenic in rats, and those three factors gave me reason to further investigate the effects of DRUFO on humans.
So how did you form your opinion on DRUFO?
Well, I have conducted extensive research on the effects of DRUFO. Notably, I've recently published a study that examined the effects of DRUFO on humans.
And how was that study conducted?
The study was conducted over numerous years and included 3 groups of people. The first group of people was a control group. The second group was a group with minimal exposure, and the third group was a group with prolonged exposure to DRUFO. I noticed the health conditions developed in these groups and then compared that back to the control group.
Could you elaborate a bit on those groups?
The people in these groups were from all walks of life, and the common thread between these people in the high and in the minimal exposure groups was that they were exposed to DRUFO. To make my study more accurate, the control group of people consisted of people that were not exposed to DRUFO.
And what did your study conclude?
Unsurprisingly, the study found that DRUFO in many cases led to cancer. In fact, in the group of people with prolonged exposure, the participants were 10 times as likely to develop cancer, and in the group of minimal exposure, they were twice as likely to develop cancer. Now, these numbers are statistically significant enough that their existence cannot be a coincidence. This would all lead me to believe that there is a link between DRUFO and serious disease.
Was one of these diseases non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Yes.
Now, Dr. Rogers, why do you think that DRUFO could cause non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Well, outside particles from DRUFO could have been absorbed by Mr. Weir's skin and collected in the lymph nodes. The concentration of the particles in the cells could have overwhelmed the lymph nodes' ability to fight infection and disease, and this could have resulted in the formation of cancer.
Now, Dr. Rogers, what did your research say about protective gear?
Although it is true that wearing protective gear decreases the risk of exposure, it is not customary for protective gear to be provided to people in Mr. Weir's field of work. And so because of this, most people don't wear protective gear.
How did you prepare for this case?
I have extensively reviewed the medical records of Mr. Weir's in preparation for this case.
And what did you learn from those records?
Well, I learned that Mr. Weir's worked in an atmosphere that would fall under the high exposure category. meaning that he was 10 times more likely to develop non-Hodgkin lymphoma. He was not given access to adequate protective gear, and that now he has non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
And what conclusion does this all lead you to?
Due to Mr. Weirs's similarity to the high exposure group and my research indicating that exposure to Drufo increases the chances of developing a serious disease, I believe that there's a high degree of probability that Mr. Weirs's non-Hodgkin's lymphoma was caused by Drufo.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Ms. Cook, do you have any cross-examination at this time?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
All right. Good afternoon, Dr. Rogers. I'd like to start by talking about your study on Drufo. So you've conducted your own study on the adverse effects of the Drufo chemical?
That is correct, although I also looked into the conditions developed by people and then looked to see if there's a correlation between that and developing non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Okay, and you testified during direct examination that you've recently published this study?
Yes.
And what's the process for getting the results of a scientific study published?
Well, the process of the study is very extensive.
I apologize, I did not hear. What was that again?
This is information not in the witness statement and may be testified to in court.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes, you may.
The witness has been entered as an expert in scientific, or I'm forgetting the exact phrasing that the plaintiff used, but they have been entered as an expert in the procedures of scientific studies in addition to agriculture and horticulture. So this should be well within their field of knowledge.
Response.
Dr. Rogers is an expert in the field. He may testify as to his knowledge.
Thank you, Your Honor.
May I proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, but please don't stray from the case materials.
Yes, of course. Would you like me to repeat my question, Dr. Rogers?
Yes, please.
What is the process for getting the results of a scientific study published?
Well, to make his study as accurate as possible, I tried to use as many people from all walks of life as possible and made sure that the common thread between these people was Drufo.
Okay, I'm discussing the process for getting these results published. This would include collaborating with a publishing entity, correct?
Yes, and in normal times, you would try and have someone peer review your study, although in my case, that was not simply realistic because my study was published so recently. As far as we know, there could be a ton of people replicating the study as we speak. It was just so recently that we don't know.
Dr. Rogers, you'll have the chance to elaborate on your answers during any redirect with opposing counsel. Right now, I just need you to focus on answering my questions. So the results of the process of publishing includes a peer review, you said.
Yes, although again, my study was, as you stated, recently released. And as far as we know, people could be, replicating my study as we speak.
And so the publishing process does include replication by other researchers.
Yes, although as I stated, as far as we know, people could be doing that right now.
Okay, and this study was conducted independently of your place of work.
That is correct.
You conducted the study on your own exclusively.
That is correct.
And you claim that your study revealed the negative effects of the Drufo chemical. You never published these findings, or did you?
Well, again, do you mind rephrasing your question?
Given that you haven't peer reviewed or replicated these findings, have you published them?
Yes. My study was recently published.
And they were never peer reviewed?
Again, it was just recently released. And as far as we know, people could be doing that right now.
Okay. You don't have anyone today that has peer reviewed that you could cite?
No, but again, because my study was so extensive, there could be people doing that right now.
Okay, and you don't have anyone today that you could name that has replicated your findings?
That is correct.
And you didn't disclose the purported results of these studies to anyone prior to your testimony today?
That is not in my witness statement.
Okay, we can move on. I would like to discuss the specific design of your study. The study compared farm laborers, gardeners, and people who didn't do either of those things. Is that right?
Well, again, people worked in similar conditions as Mr. Weir's.
Again, I just need a yes or no to my answers. You'll have a chance to elaborate on redirect.
These people were from all walks of life, and they would fall under the same category as Mr. Weir's line of work.
Okay, so it compared farm laborers, gardeners, and people who didn't do either of those things. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And among the farm laborers, you did not ensure that the Drufo fertilizer was the only product they were using. Is that right?
Drufo was the main component that I was analyzing, yes.
You did not control for any other agricultural products that people may have been exposed to, did you?
Well, again, there's always some possibility, but it is highly unlikely.
Okay, and among the gardeners, you didn't ensure that Drufo was the only product being used.
Again, there's some degree of probability that there was another particle in there, but the overwhelming probability is that Drufo was the only particle that they were exposed to that could have caused non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
For the record, is that a yes to my question or no?
That would be a yes.
Okay, and you didn't select participants with similar lifestyles outside of their jobs, did you?
No, but I did that for a very intentional reason. I wanted to make sure that these people were from all walks of life and that Drufo was the only linking factor between these people. As I stated in my direct examination, this bolstered my study.
So you didn't select participants from a group of people that were already healthy?
No, I did not. But again, that was for an intentional reason.
And you didn't select from a group of participants that didn't have any pre-existing conditions, in your words, intentionally?
I don't believe that is in my witness statement. Would you?
We'll move on. You didn't control for genetic predispositions among the participants?
That is correct.
And lastly, your study claims to have found a correlation between exposure to Drufo and cancer diagnosis. Is that right?
Yes, there's a high degree of probability that Drufo causes non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
Can you explain to the jury the difference between correlation and causation?
Again, there with correlation, there's some degree of probability that that another factor could have caused the non-Hodgkin lymphoma, although again, that is highly, highly unlikely.
Okay, thank you. Let's now talk about the purported effects of exposure to Drufo. So you claim that Drufo is correlated with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
That is correct.
And you're familiar with the sickness?
That is correct.
And the sickness is usually caused by exposure to something in the environment?
Yes.
It includes exposure to pesticides?
Yes.
And most of that exposure occurs by breathing in the chemicals, right?
Or again, contact with skin. But
Okay.
Again, in Mr. Weir's field of work, it was not really realistic for people to wear protective gear because they work such a labor-intensive job.
But you do recommend that people wear protective gear when working with chemicals?
I recommend it, but I understand that it's not always reasonable for people to do that.
Okay, but you do recommend wearing long sleeves?
Yes, but again, it's not always reasonable for people to do that.
And you do recommend wearing a medical grade mask?
Yes, although when people work in hot conditions, it's understandable that they don't, or that they're unable to wear that mask.
Okay, so let's lastly discuss your motivation for your involvement in today's case. This is the first time you're testifying as an expert witness?
Yes, every expert witness has to start somewhere.
And your research on Drufo is being used for this case?
Yes, I hope to help as many people in Mr. Weir's unfortunate circumstances as I can.
So you're expecting more class action lawsuits to follow this?
That might be a result of this case, but again, I hope to help as many people as I can, and that is my primary goal.
You hope to help as many people as you can by providing expert testimony in future cases?
That might be a result of this, yes.
And that's because your testimony in today's case will put you on the map, won't it?
Again, that might be a result, but that is definitely not my primary goal.
I just need a yes or no to my question.
That's not my primary goal.
Okay, no further questions.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Any redirect, Ms. Walsh?
Yes, please, Your Honor, if I may.
You may.
Dr. Rogers, why did you choose these groups of people that you studied?
Well, again, as I stated, I chose these groups of people very intentionally because they were from all walks of life. And I wanted to prove that the common thread between these people is Drufo and that they did all develop non-Hodgkin lymphoma.
And Dr. Rogers, what was the custom surrounding protect gear in Mr. Weirs' field of work?
Objection, lack of knowledge.
I'm sorry, I did not hear that objection. Ms. Cook, could you repeat it, please?
Yes, Your Honor. The witness does not have knowledge of Dakota Weir's specific work environment during the years they were working there.
Response, Your Honor.
Yes, you may.
Your Honor, in my direct examination, I laid foundation that Dr. Rogers has reviewed the records of Mr. Weirs and understands to a degree his working conditions, and as well, he has conducted a study which involved farm laborers. And so in this time, he was able to garner an understanding of their field of work, as well as gardeners and other laborers with fertilizer.
Overruled. You may testify about it.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you like me to repeat the question?
Yes, please.
What was the custom surrounding protective gear in Mr. Weirs' field of work?
Well, it had been my understanding that people in Mr. Weirs' field of work are not given access to protective gear. In addition, he worked a very laborious job where it's not always realistic that people wear that protective gear.
Thank you, Dr. Rogers. No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Thank you, Ms. Cook. And thank you, Dr. Rogers, for testifying. You may be excused. Are the plaintiffs, do they rest with regard to their case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor, the plaintiff rests.
Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Is that, excuse me. Do the respondents, are you ready to proceed with your case in chief?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense is ready to proceed.
Thank you, Ms. Jack. You may call your first witness.
The defense calls Blake Doncourt to the stand. May I proceed, Your Honor?
Hold on just 1 second. Let me rearrange my screen here. There we go. I apologize. I just need to be able to see all of you together. So it's just easier for me. Ms. Doncourt, I remind you that you are still under oath. Ms. Jack, you may proceed.
Good evening, Ms. Doncourt. Can you please state your name and spell your last name for the record?
My name is Blake Doncourt. That's Doncourt.
Thank you. What do you do for a living?
I am the Chief Executive Officer of Lush Fertilizer. It's a company that I started in 2000.
And what does your company sell?
We sell yard and commercial fertilizers.
Has Lush been a successful company doing this?
Yes, actually, we're the world's largest supplier of fertilizer. We're able to direct 10% of our profits towards charity.
What charities do you donate to?
Well, we mainly focus on charities that reduce the world's nitrogen footprint. We've actually been fortunate enough to start our own charity that focuses on cleaning polluted areas of oceans.
Your Honor, unfair bolstering.
Ms. Jack, do you have a response?
I don't think it's unfair for the owner of this company to talk about the character that exists within this company and its charitable work in order to establish not only her character, but the conduct of the company.
Overruled, Mr. Wong. Ms. Jack, you may proceed. Ms. Doncourt, if you can answer the question, you may do so.
Would you like me to repeat the question, Ms. Doncourt?
Yes, please.
What charities do you donate to?
We focus on donating to charities that reduce the world's nitrogen footprint. And we've also thought it's very important to clean polluted areas of the ocean. So we started our own charity for that.
Has the company received any recognition for its work?
We have actually. In 2019, Lush was one of the recipients of the Steel Business Sustainability Awards, and I was personally nominated for the United Nations Champions of the Earth Award in 2020.
Now, let's move on to today's case. What brings you here today?
Well, sadly, Lush and I are being falsely accused of ignoring a carcinogen in our fertilizer.
What is the alleged carcinogen in question?
Drufo, a bonding agent that we use in our fertilizer, is being linked to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. I'm deeply sorry for plaintiff Dakota Weirs, but it is simply not the fault of Lush's fertilizer.
And why is it that you believe Dakota's disease wasn't caused by Lush fertilizer?
Well, Dakota worked with multiple fertilizers and lawn chemicals for years when they were working as a landscaper. We don't know what those chemicals were, but they could have been easily linked to her disease. The primary reason I'm saying this is that Lush fertilizer is not correlated with an increased risk of non-Hodgkin's lymphoma.
Did you perform research and testing on the fertilizers before putting them on the market?
Absolutely, we did. We always do. We performed extensive research and testing and did not identify this as a specific risk. Our toxicology research and development team, including and the EPA, found nothing in the product to require warning on the packaging.
Now, Lush doesn't bake its fertilizer. Why is that?
Well, the purpose of baking a fertilizer is to remove any risk that it's carcinogenic. But with Lush fertilizer, there wasn't any risk in the first place. Our extensive research did not identify this as a risk to people coming into contact with the fertilizer.
And have there been any studies to show that Drufo was carcinogenic in humans?
Well, the only study done was by Casey Rogers, who was hired by the plaintiff. It was never even published in a scientific journal.
Has anyone besides Casey Rogers made these claims?
Yes, Carson Durst. They used to work for Lush and only ever raised a concern about the product after they were working for our biggest competitor, Terra's Greenery.
Did Carson ever mention anything to you about Drufo being dangerous?
Not once, and that was their job, was to look for dangers and risks associated with the product, but I never heard anything from them about this.
And when did Carson leave the company?
Well, they actually left once they got a more lucrative deal from Terra's Greenery.
And if there was a verifiable risk that Drufo was carcinogenic, would you have put it on the market?
No, our company would have never done that, and I would have personally not allowed it.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Jack. Mr. Wang, do you have any cross-examination of Ms. Duncourt?
Yes, I do, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Duncourt, sorry. Ms. Duncourt, throughout your direct testimony, you constantly use the term valid studies.
Yes.
A valid study would be one that was conducted by your research team.
Yes, that's correct.
A valid study would also be one apparently by the EPA.
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
A valid study would also be one done apparently by the EPA.
Yes, as I said, the EPA did conclude that there was nothing dangerous in our fertilizer.
And both of these studies, in fact, concluded that your fertilizer did not require a warning label for carcinogens.
Yes.
So you put no carcinogenic label.
No, we didn't.
Because the amount of toxicity did not meet the federal requirement.
Yes.
You do not believe, however, that the study by Casey Rogers was valid.
No, I don't.
Dr. Casey Rogers' study concluded a concerning link between Drufo and cancer.
Yes, that's what the study concluded, but I don't believe that the study was valid for many reasons.
You don't believe the study was valid because it was never published in a journal.
That's one of the reasons. Also because the groups that they used were not just solely exposed to Drufo. They could have been exposed to many other things that comes with the lifestyle of being a farmer or gardener. There's no direct link to it to being Drufo.
But Ms. Duncourt, that's what your top scientist, Devin Williams, told you.
Told me what?
That's what your scientist, Devin Williams, told you about the experiment.
That there was no link?
That the study was poorly run.
Yes.
You did not conclude this yourself. Ms. Duncourt, you did not conclude this yourself.
No, not at all. I had other people to consult with me.
Ms. Duncourt, you do not claim to be educated in research, scientific studies.
No, I don't claim that.
Now, Ms. Duncourt, your company researched Drufo.
That's correct.
And while it did not meet the federal requirement for a carcinogenic warning, there was still a level of toxicity in your fertilizer.
Not that I ever heard of. All the research we did came back saying that there was no risk, little to no risk, and that's why we never even considered putting a warning label on the packaging.
But Ms. Duncourt, your product still contains nitrogen.
It does.
Which is a carcinogenic.
It is, but because of the specific nature of Drufo, it's not synthetic nitrogen, and it's more. We developed it so that it lasts longer, and you don't have to use as much of it, so it's not as toxic to the environment, and it's not as high a risk to people either.
It's not as high risk, Ms. Duncourt, but there is still a risk.
Objection, Your Honor, asked and answered.
I do not believe that question was asked and answered. You may go ahead, Ms. Dunkirk, and answer the question.
Ms. Duncourt, would you like me to repeat the question?
Please.
There was not a significant risk, but there was still a risk in your fertilizer.
Sure, there's a risk with all fertilizers, and that's why we specifically put recommendations for protective clothing. And we actually made sure that the Drufo was actually less of a risk than other fertilizers.
Ms. Duncourt, there was a way to completely eliminate any of this risk.
Yes, there is.
That would be to bake the products.
That's correct.
Baking is a costly process, isn't it, Ms. Duncourt?
It is.
In fact, you even made a table to show how expensive it was in 2004.
Yes, it's always a good idea to evaluate costs.
I would request, let the record reflect that I'm asking the timekeeper to share what has been marked as Exhibit 8.
Could that be shared? Thank you.
Ms. Duncourt, is this an accurate representation of the chart that you made in 2004?
Yeah.
Then, Your Honor, I move to admit this exhibit into evidence.
Any objection, Ms. Jack?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 8 will be admitted into evidence.
I would also request that Exhibit 8 be published to the jury.
It is so published.
Ms. Duncourt, in 2004, your company would have made roughly $1.7 million before baking.
Yes.
Baking would cost around $250,000.
That's correct.
In 2014, the total loss because you baked would be $2.6 million.
That's correct.
Thank you, timekeeper. You may stop the screen share. Ms. Duncourt, Lush Fertilizer, you earlier testified that Lush Fertilizer has become one of the leading producers of global fertilizer.
Yes.
You also testified that that success has allowed you to donate 10% of your earnings to charity.
Yes.
But you do not spend any money baking your fertilizer.
No, because the baking is to eliminate any risk that may come from our fertilizer, but there was no risk to begin with, so there was no need to bake the fertilizer.
And Ms. Duncourt, you used that saved money to pay your venture capitalists.
Of course, and to pay off my employees, I need to make sure that I'm paying them a living wage.
Thank you, Your Honor. I have no further questions for this witness at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Wong. Any redirect, Ms. Jack?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Ms. Duncourt, why did you choose not to bake the fertilizer?
Because all of our research and our toxicology reports reported that there was no specific risk of our product causing non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. And when we evaluated that the cost was too great to eliminate the little to no risk, we decided that there was no need to bake the fertilizer.
And Ms. Duncourt, if profits were an issue for the company, Would you be able to donate 10% of the profits to charity?
No, we wouldn't. That's why our company is so focused on making sure that we can donate our money because it's important to us.
No further questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. Ms. Dunkirk, thank you so much for your testimony. You are excused. Ms. Jack, does the defense have any other witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, we do.
Thank you. Ms. Cook, will you be addressing the next witness?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Skylar Weirs to the stand.
Thank you. And who will be cross-examining Ms. Weirs?
I will, Your Honor. Apologies.
Not a problem. Thank you, Mr. Dar. Ms. Weirs, I'll remind you that you are still under oath. Ms. Cook, you may proceed with direct examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Weirs. Can you please state your name and spell your last name for the record? Oh, you're muted.
Sorry, I was muted. Of course, my name is Skylar Weirs. That's Weirs.
So I'd like to begin by discussing your career. What do you do for a living?
I'm an investigative journalist focusing on the conflict between individual health and corporate policy.
And what do you specifically investigate as a journalist?
Well, my editor recently picked me to write a series of articles on modern agritech. I've written about Lush fertilizer and Drufo specifically, particularly to question the narrative that there is a causal link between Drufo and cancer.
And how do you go about researching agricultural technology or agritech?
Well, I start by reading publications issued by various agritech companies. Then I track down and review the research studies referenced in those publications. I also track down a wealth of information maintained by the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture. I've engaged in this process for almost a year now, so my knowledge base incorporates general knowledge and historical and statistical information.
And why is your perspective on agricultural technology important in this case?
Well, I have a vast and in-depth knowledge about agricultural products and companies, specifically regarding Lush fertilizer and Drufo. And other than the USDA and the NASDA, I doubt anyone has the overall perspective on modern agritech that I do.
Your Honor, the defense moves to admit Skylar Weirs as an expert in agricultural technology.
Sorry, I muted myself. There were dogs barking in my background. Apologizing. Mr. Dar, do you have any objections?
Yes, Your Honor. If I may perform a brief voir dire.
You may proceed.
Now, Ms. Weirs, you chose to forego college.
Yes, that is correct, to pursue my passion of writing.
In fact, you have no knowledge working with agritech specifically.
I've done a fair amount of research for my articles that I've written.
But you have no knowledge working with agritech.
I've never worked with agritech, but I've researched into agritech.
You have no skill regarding agritech.
No, I don't work with agriculture.
You don't have experience working with agritech.
No, I'm not a gardener or a farmer.
You don't have training working with agritech.
Again, I'm not a gardener or a farmer.
Or you don't have education working with agritech.
No, but I've done research into agritech.
Now, regarding your research, you don't specify how many articles you read on agritech.
No, I do not.
Nor do you clarify how many agritech companies you researched.
No, I don't.
Your Honor, pursuant to Rule 702, Ms. Weirs doesn't qualify as an expert on the basis that she has no knowledge, skill, experience, training, or education. Also, pursuant to the pretrial ruling, defense has failed to prove that Skylar Weirs spent considerable time researching agritech companies by reviewing their publications.
Ms. Cook, do you have a response?
Yes, Your Honor. There isn't a witness that has more specialized knowledge and education than Ms. Weirs does. I've already established the foundation of their extensive research into agricultural technology, and the plaintiff has not laid foundation that working within an agri-tech company is necessary for them to be able to provide expert testimony.
A response, Your Honor?
Very briefly, Mr. Dar.
Yes. While the defense says she has no specialized knowledge in Ms. Weirs' testimony, she claims to have only general knowledge plus historical and statistical information.
I will allow Ms. Weir to testify as an expert. However, I will caution you, Ms. Cook. Normally, I would not allow this witness to testify as an expert. But for purposes of the competition, I am going to allow it.
Okay. May I proceed, Your Honor?
You may proceed.
Okay. So as an investigative journalist, do you work with any specific publishing company?
Yes, I write for The Rationalist, which is a quarterly science education and advocacy magazine. It's published by the Rationalist Society, which is a nonprofit organization devoted to promoting scientific skepticism. We encourage readers to intelligently scrutinize jargon and rhetoric.
And can you further explain why scientific skepticism is important?
Of course, skepticism is a key concept in science generally, but is particularly important in this case because agriculture has been extremely politicized and sensationalized, mostly due to
Objection, Your Honor. This witness has a lack of foundation to talk about such a topic.
That's not part of the area of expertise that Ms. Weir has been certified under Ms. Cook. So would you clarify that?
May I ask for clarification on the grounds of the objection? The witness was testifying about the importance of scientific skepticism in the agricultural industry, which is something that she's been entered as an expert in. So could I just get some clarification on that? Apologies.
My understanding is that she has been admitted as a conditional witness with an expertise in agri-tech, not with regard to scientific skepticism or politicized information. So I think that was my understanding of the objection. So you may proceed with further laying of foundation if that's your choice. Otherwise, you need to move on.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. I'll rephrase my question. Can you explain scientific skepticism in the context of the agricultural sector?
Of course. So scientific skepticism is a key concept in science in general, but is particularly important in agriculture because the agricultural sector, the agri-tech sector is spending billions of dollars to destroy Lester's reputation in order to protect their profits.
Objection, Your Honor. This is once again a lack of foundation as they haven't established Ms. Weirs as an expert in agricultural industry or PR for that matter, only on agri-tech as a sector.
What's your response, Ms. Cook?
Yes, Your Honor. The witness is testifying about agricultural technology and how it has been politicized. There is no requisite PR expertise that is necessary to make that observation, especially given that they've spent a year researching agricultural technology in accordance with the principle of scientific skepticism per their job at the Rationalist magazine, which we have established foundational for.
Any response, Mr. Dar?
No, Your Honor, I stand by my objection.
I'll allow limited testimony with regard to this matter. You may proceed, Ms. Cook.
Thank you, Your Honor. Were you finished with your answer to the previous question?
No, would you like me to finish my answer?
Yes, please.
So skepticism can unveil these insidious motives and help promote effective environmental and human health protection.
Okay, thank you. So let's move on to discuss the specifics of this case. Throughout your research, have you specifically looked into the Drufo fertilizer?
Yes, I have.
And why did you decide to research Drufo?
Well, I became interested in Lush fertilizer because Drufo could be a game changer in agriculture as a safe alternative. I also admire Lush Fertilizer's charity work. Their CEO started their own charity, and they donate a chunk of their profits every year to clean up water pollution.
And can you explain the differences between Drufo fertilizer and other types?
Of course, Drufo is an incredibly effective bonding agent. This is a huge revolution in agritech. Drufo's effective bonding means that a significantly smaller amount of fertilizer and pesticides is needed to be applied to achieve the desired effect. So Drufo only needs to be applied once or twice a year, whereas other grass fertilizers need to be applied 5 to 6 times per year.
So what are some benefits of the Drufo chemical or the Drufo fertilizer?
Well, less frequent use of fertilizer is important because it reduces environmental pollution. Nitrogen found in many types of fertilizer is known to contribute to sickness in humans and runoff into oceans and lakes. Not only can Drufo be used much less than other fertilizers, but it also reduces the solubility of fertilizer. So the nitrogen is less likely to contaminate water. It's also an effective pesticide, which means that it doesn't need to be used alongside other grass seed products. Drufo is unlike these other fertilizers, which is why it's so important to keep it on the market.
And are there any dangers associated with the Drufo chemical?
No, I'm not aware of any study that has established a causal link between Drufo and cancer with any level of certainty. If anything, fertilizer with Drufo actually protects consumers by eliminating exposure to other agricultural products that are carcinogens.
And I'd also like to discuss your relationship with the plaintiff. What is your relationship with Dakota Weirs?
Dakota is my twin brother.
And how do you feel about testifying against a member of your family?
I don't have a stereotypically close twin relationship, but we're still family, and I love my brother. I want justice for Dakota as much as the rest of my family, but he is assigning blame to the wrong company. And I felt I needed to use my knowledge to ensure that justice is actually achieved.
And I would also like to talk about the impacts of your testimony today in your career. Can you describe how this case has affected your work as a journalist?
Of course. Well, honestly, despite my writing generating income, I'm freelance. So my articles have hardly been lucrative. And this is because all of the prominent researchers in agriculture are bought off by major agriculture companies. As a result of this case, I've actually lost out on many potential job opportunities for having the gall to challenge some major players in agriculture.
And according to your research overall, is Lush fertilizer responsible for Dakota's illness?
Absolutely not.
And according to your research, why do you think that Dakota developed?
Objection, Your Honor, to the previous question. That was a leading question.
That question was leading. Could you rephrase it, please?
Your Honor, may I ask for clarification on why my question was leading?
You may, Mr. Dar.
Yes, to the previous question, Ms. Cook asks whether she believes that Drufo caused Dakota's cancer, which obviously is a leading question.
Your Honor, I was not leading the witness. Rather, I was asking them a question that had an open end.
The way you phrased them, Mr. Dar, I agree with counsel, so overruled. You may go ahead and answer the question.
Thank you, Your Honor. Would you like me to repeat my question, Ms. Weirs?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll go back to my previous question. So according to your research, is Lush fertilizer responsible for Dakota's illness?
Absolutely not.
And according to your research, why do you think that Dakota developed non-Hodgkin lymphoma?
Dakota was exposed to a whole host of products that contain carcinogens from his years of work in landscaping. Dakota is blaming the one product that was designed to reduce the need for continued and repeated exposure to harmful chemicals. If Haven Landscaping didn't use Lush fertilizer, Dakota might have been exposed to synthetic nitrogen far more often.
And you mentioned Haven Landscaping. To your knowledge, can you elaborate on this company's involvement in today's case?
Of course. This case is an issue of poor training by the owner of Haven Landscaping. Dakota was 14 when he started working with harmful chemicals. Lush Fertilizer has an explicit label advising to keep the product away from minors. No company should allow its teenage employees to work with chemicals without wearing proper protective gear, at least a mask and gloves, which is advised on the label of the fertilizer. Dakota is going after the wrong company.
Thank you. No further questions.
Any cross-examination, Mr. Dar?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Now, Ms. Weirs, you have spent around a year studying agritech for your articles,
Yes, that is correct.
and one of your articles was about Drufo.
Yes, I wrote an article about Drufo.
It was regarding a causal link between Drufo and cancer.
Yes,
And there is no discussion of the contents of this article besides the initial mentioning of it.
no,
But you don't actually specify how much time you spent studying Drufo.
I spent about a year researching agritech, including Drufo.
Yeah, you don't specify how much of that time was on Drufo.
No, I do not.
And the bulk of your research came from the USDA, the NASDA, and other articles.
Yes, other researchers that and then I specifically went into those researchers and found the articles that they got their research from.
However, you never mention who wrote those articles.
No, I did not.
You don't mention the date of publication for these articles.
No, I do not.
You don't mention how many articles.
No, I do not.
In fact, you never even mention the contents of those articles.
No, I do not.
Now, let's go back to your research on Lush and Drufo. During your research, you studied what it does,
Yes,
how it works.
yes, that is correct.
In fact, you actually mentioned what Lush is made of.
Yes, that is correct.
One of these ingredients is nitrogen,
Yes, along with potassium and phosphorus and Drufo.
and nitrogen is carcinogenic.
Yes, and nitrogen is a common ingredient in many other fertilizers as well.
While you argue Drufo reduces nitrogen, there is still an obvious risk.
Yes, that is correct. Drufo uses nitrogen, whereas other fertilizers uses synthetic nitrogen. Nitrogen is less carcinogenic than synthetic nitrogen.
You even say in your witness statement that there is at least some level of risk with modern agricultural products.
Yes, that is correct. No fertilizer is 100% safe.
So there is a risk that Drufo is carcinogenic.
Yes,
In fact, you never explicitly deny that Drufo causes cancer.
no,
You only say that you aren't aware of any study that links Drufo to cancer.
no, I'm not aware of any study that has done that.
You only insist that Drufo makes Lush safer, not risk-free.
That is correct. Due to the fact that Drufo only needs to be applied once or twice a year, it makes Lush fertilizer much safer than other fertilizers because it reduces the exposure of nitrogen to the environment and to the consumer.
Now, your twin worked at Haven Landscaping without you,
Yes, that is correct.
so you have no ideas about the means of the training that Dakota went through with Haven Landscaping.
No, he has not discussed that with me.
You therefore have no knowledge of the other fertilizers used by Haven,
No, I do not.
meaning you have no knowledge on whether or not the other fertilizers used by Haven could be carcinogenic.
Not all fertilizers contain nitrogen, which is carcinogenic.
Yet you have no idea whether or not the fertilizers used by Haven could be.
That is correct.
Your Honor, thank you, Ms. Weirs. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Dar. Ms. Cook, do you have any redirect?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Cook. Thank you, Ms. Ware. Thank you, Mr. Dar. Does the defense have any other witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor. The defense calls Dr. Williams to the stand.
Thank you. Hold on a second. There we go. Okay. Ms. Avera, you may proceed. I would caution or remind you, Dr. Williams, that you continue to be under oath.
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed, Ms. Avera.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good evening, Dr. Williams. Please state your name and pronouns for the record. Spell your last name as well.
Devin Williams, spelled Williams, and pronouns she, her.
What do you do for a living, Dr. Williams?
Well, I lead the toxicology research and development labs at Lush Fertilizer.
How did your career start?
I started at Lush about 10 years ago.
Have you gotten any promotions since?
Yes, actually, I have been leading the toxicology lab for about 7 years.
Where did you get your education?
My education from undergrad through was completed at Colorado State University, Fort Collins.
And what about training?
I did a specialized post-PhD program in pharmacotoxicology at the University of Utah.
What state did you get your certifications from?
Well, I have certifications in Colorado, New Mexico, Wyoming, and Utah.
Dr. Williams, I'm going to direct your attention to Exhibit 9.
Okay.
All right, do you have it open?
Yes.
Do you recognize this document?
Yes.
What is this document?
This document is a copy of my certification.
Is this a true and accurate representation of this document?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, we move to admit Exhibit 9 into evidence.
Well, I haven't seen Exhibit 9. I apologize, and I do not have it up. Did you want to share the screen?
I will share my screen. Sorry. Thank you.
Oh, it's the curriculum vitae. I apologize. I must have misheard. I thought you said it was a certification, and I just didn't recall any certifications. It's just Dr. Williams's curriculum vitae or resume. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Any objection to this exhibit?
No objection, Your Honor.
Exhibit 9 will be accepted into evidence.
Thank you, Your Honor. So what do you do as a toxicologist?
Well, as a toxicologist, I do many things that involve research and evaluating test results to determine the fate and effects of potentially toxic chemical agents by using biomolecular and biochemical markers. I know how to tell if the substance is going to harm the average human and how to neutralize that harm if it does happen.
How did you get promoted to leading the toxicology lab?
I started filling in as a technician as the turnover was beginning to impact testing timeliness. Later, I was promoted to lead the labs, largely to oversee work on environmental impact.
Your Honor, the defense moves to enter Dr. Devin Williams as an expert toxicologist.
Any objection, Ms. Walsh?
No objection, Your Honor.
Dr. Williams will be accepted as an expert in toxicology. Do you need the Exhibit 9 still to be up?
I do not. Thank you. Sorry.
Not a problem. Go ahead.
What is DRUFO?
DRUFO is an agent that is put in fertilizer, which adds nutrients and enhances the effectiveness of the soil, all while being environmentally friendly by avoiding eutrophication, and it is also quite cost effective.
What is eutrophication?
Eutrophication is buildup of excessive nutrients in bodies of water caused by agricultural runoff.
How do some fertilizers cause eutrophication?
Well, the unused nitrogen from fertilizers gets converted to nitrates by bacteria in the soil. Then those nitrates are carried into streams and lakes by rain and irrigation runoff.
I did not hear that objection, Ms. Walsh. Could you
I'm
restate it?
objecting to outside the scope of expertise. Your Honor.
Do you want to elaborate?
Yes, I will. Dr. Williams has been tendered as an expert in toxicology, but they have not been tendered as an expert in biological systems or agriculture or anything having to do with eutrophication or fertilizers.
Ms. Avera?
As an expert in toxicology and as a person who works at a fertilizer company, it is within his field to know about eutrophication and its causes to the environment.
Would you like to lay a foundation for that? Because I'm going to sustain the objection. Go
Okay.
ahead. You may want to lay a foundation and offer Dr. Williams as an expert in those fields.
Yes, Your Honor. So if Drufo is a much environmentally safer alternative to traditional fertilizers, why is it banned in France?
Well, not only is it banned in France, but it is also banned in the EU. This is not because of any cancer risks, but because no new fertilizer formulations may be used that contribute more than incidental nitrate accumulation in lab tests.
How does Drufo have more nitrate accumulation than normal?
Well, if the right chemicals are added to a petri dish, you will get as much nitrate as a normal fertilizer. However, in real-world circumstances, Drufo greatly reduces nitrate accumulation.
In your professional opinion, does the use of Drufo cause non-Hodgkin's lymphoma?
No, it does not.
How do you know?
We've done these studies, and the data shows that users of fertilizers with Drufo do not have an elevated risk of non-Hodgkin lymphoma compared to users of fertilizers that don't have Drufo.
Why do you compare lush fertilizer to other fertilizers?
Well, it stops me from comparing farm laborers, causal gardeners, and people who don't garden at all. All have different exposure levels to the fertilizers used.
Thank you, Dr. Williams, and thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
Any cross-examination, Ms. Walsh?
Yes, Your Honor, if I may.
Yes, you may. Proceed.
Dr. Williams, you work for Lush Fertilizer, don't you?
Yes, that's correct.
And you've worked there for about 10 years now.
That is correct.
That's a pretty long time, isn't it?
Yes.
And you lead the research and development lab, don't you?
Yes, for about 7 years now.
That's a top tier position, isn't it?
Sorry, you cut out for a second.
That's a top tier position, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And you're in a position of leadership.
Yes, that's correct.
You're comfortable at Lush, aren't you?
I am, very much so.
You wouldn't want to work anywhere else?
Honestly, no. I really enjoy working at Lush.
Now, Dr. Williams, you favor Lush over Mr. Weirs, don't you?
What do you mean by that?
Well, in your witness statement, you mentioned that you have a financial bias in this case.
Well, everyone has a bias. It's human nature.
But you agree that you have a financial bias in this case.
Yes, I agree, as would anyone else.
And you agree that a bias means a prejudice for one thing over another.
Yes, that's true.
And Mr. Weirs isn't paying you to be his witness, is he?
No, he is not.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Let's talk about Drufo for a moment. You believe that Drufo is revolutionary, don't you?
Yes, I do. It has many environmental and.
For example, it minimizes unused chemicals.
Yes, that's correct.
And that decreases runoff.
Yes, that's correct.
And it needs to be applied less frequently.
That is correct.
All of these things make it better for the environment, don't they?
Yes, they do.
So Drufo is what makes Lush fertilizer better for the environment.
Yes, that is correct. Drufo is very environmentally friendly.
But Drufo is banned in the EU, isn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
And Lush could have fought the EU decision.
Yes, we could have, although we were a pretty new company, so there was really no reason to with our limited resources and all.
So you didn't fight the decision?
No, we didn't, once again, because we were a new company.
It was just easier to manufacture a line of products without Drufo for sale in countries that prohibited it, wasn't it?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's what Lush did?
Yes.
That's not very ecological, is it?
I wouldn't say that.
You're currently conducting a study to disprove this ban.
Yes, actually I am. I'm working to prove that Drufo is very environmentally positive.
And you anticipate that your findings will lead to reconsideration of EU approval?
Yes, that is correct.
But this lawsuit could change that, couldn't it?
Well, of course it would, but I have faith that it won't reach that conclusion because it does not cause cancer. It would be a shame for that incorrect conclusion to be met and would also reduce the very many positive environmental impacts.
But if this court were to rule in Mr. Rears' favor, it would create a whole host of bureaucratic roadblocks for the reversal of this ban, wouldn't it?
Yes, it would.
Now, Dr. Williams, you're often asked to postulate as to broader outcomes than can be derived from your data, aren't you?
Yeah.
In other words, you make educated guesses.
I wouldn't say educated guesses. I am a toxicologist and all.
But you agree that a postulation is an assumption.
Yes.
And sometimes these assumptions are beyond your specific research.
I wouldn't say that. I know a lot about the assumptions that I'm making. They're not just random assumptions.
They're not random, but they are broader than what your research implies.
I wouldn't say that.
Okay. But Lush has conducted studies on the safety of Drufo, haven't they?
Yes, we did in 2003.
And these studies have concluded that Drufo is below a normal confidence level according to the law.
Yes, that is correct.
But Dr. Williams, isn't it true that when someone finds what they set out to find, you should always question their results?
Yes, that is true.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. I have no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
I apologize. Thank you, Ms. Walsh. Any further redirect, Ms. Ibarra?
No redirect, Your Honor.
Thank you, Ms. Ibarra. You are excused, Dr. Williams. I appreciate it. Does the defense have any further witnesses?
No, Your Honor, the defense rests.
Thank you. Let's go ahead and take a minute or so so that you can prepare yourselves for closing arguments. Are the plaintiffs ready?
Yes, Your Honor.
And is the defense ready for closings?
Yes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Mr. Dar, you may go ahead and proceed with your closing argument.
Thank you, Your Honor. People of the jury, the case in front of you is not one to deliberate on. It is a clear-cut showing of greed on Lush's part and the willingness to put capital over compassion. From the shoddy experiments to the refusal to bake products and put a simple warning label on it, Lush has failed over and over again, all for the sake of protecting the name of Drufo and maximizing profits. As the party with the burden of proof, the plaintiff was tasked with proving 4 elements of negligence. There was a duty, there was a breach of that duty, there were damages, and the breach of that duty caused the damages. Time and time again, we have highlighted these clear breaches of the duties assigned to Lush when putting out their products. First, the studies done by Casey Rogers shows a clear causal link between Drufo and cancer. Through rigorous studies, Dr. Rogers' expert testimony creates an undeniable connection about how carcinogenic Drufo is, and especially its connection to non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Through this study, he testifies that those exposed to Drufo are 10 times more likely to develop cancer than those who aren't. Carson Durst's testimony illustrated the forced agenda that was the development and safety testing on Drufo. Through her time working there and being tasked with testing the carcinogenicity of Truffaut, she shows that despite her findings, the research team tried to fit the circle through the square hole, making conclusions out of nothing and ignoring important data that would put others at risk. Blake Doncourt saw Truffaut as the goose that laid the golden egg, and he decided to protect his sweet profits at any cost. Dakota was a victim to the greed of Lush. Everything was snatched away from him: Juilliard, the piano, even comfortably walking around his own house, ripped from him because of one company's inexcusable negligence. Not only was there a clear duty for Lush to warn about the carcinogenic nature of Truffaut, there was a violation of that duty. Even on the product itself, Lush's carelessness is spotlighted through the misspelling of the label, showing the utter disregard for user safety. This whole situation is magnified by the money-hungry nature of Blake. Knowing that there was a potential risk behind Truffaut, she refused to spend the extra money required to bake the product to ensure safety, all for the sake of her investors. Her duty to warn, paired with the breach, no, utter disregard for her duty, illustrates that Lush was motivated by profits and nothing else. Even in the selection of their experts, Lush did the bare minimum. First, in introducing Skylar Weirs, whose so-called expert qualifications could be replicated by just about anyone who knows how to use the internet. From unnamed publications to the unspecified amount of time they spent researching Truffaut, and worst of all, no actual evidence to disprove the carcinogenicity of Truffaut in the slightest, Weirs is the farthest from a credible witness. And finally, Devin Williams, whose studies revolve around guesswork and maybes. To address the obvious elephant in the room, the incentive to support Lush creates a gaping hole in the credibility of her opinions. The fact that she has everything to gain from the case going a particular way should illustrate this bias quite clearly. On top of this, Dr. Williams admitted that Lush was willing to release a product not containing Truffaut, and once again casting doubt upon the validity of her study. As the party with the burden of proof, the plaintiff was tasked with proving 4 elements of negligence pursuant to jury instruction number 2. And we have done just that. Lush put out a clearly carcinogenic fertilizer into the market. Lush's rushed and forced research ignored this carcinogenicity of Truffaut. Lush failed to accept its mistakes and chased after profits instead, leading to crippling repercussions to Dakota's health. And Lush, through their greed and laziness, caused the damages to Dakota that may never be solved again. We, as the plaintiff, are asking for $11 million in compensation, as the day-to-day opportunities Dakota had are no more due to Lush. People of the jury, I implore you to make the right decision and find Lush liable. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dar. Ms. Cook, you may proceed with your closing.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor and members of the jury, despite the plaintiff's passion for music, the plaintiff's theory of this case is off-key. Between the plaintiff's failure to comply with the safety precautions labeled on the product, their lack of scientific evidence, and opportunistic motives, it is clear that Lush Fertilizer is not in any way responsible for Dakota Weir's unfortunate illness. Today, you heard from Dakota Weirs himself. Dakota Weirs testified that he was only 14 years old, a child, when he began his job at Haven Landscaping. Lush Fertilizer's label explicitly states to keep the products out of the hands of children. Dakota Weirs has admitted that they used Lush Fertilizer without a mask, without long pants, and without long sleeves. The product explicitly recommends the use of protective gear. Dakota's blatant disregard for explicitly advised safety measures indicates his comparative negligence and makes clear that Dakota was not reasonably expected to use the product and that Lush Fertilizer took every necessary safety precaution. Moreover, Dakota's testified that he used several agricultural products. Additionally, despite Lush Fertilizer's meticulous efforts to ensure the safety of their product, fertilizer with Truffaut has not been proven to be a carcinogen or dangerous in any way. The plaintiff presented Carson Durst today, who attempted to claim that Truffaut was dangerous and that Lush knew about these dangers but didn't implement proper safety protocols. However, Carson Durst is not a scientist, is rather barely an intern that did absolutely no research themselves. Carson Durst is also extremely biased against the defendant as an employee of a rival fertilizer company. The plaintiff also attempted to claim that Truffaut is unsafe with the testimony of Casey Rogers. But as Dr. Devin Williams has testified, Casey Rogers' study was conducted without a lab. It was never published, it was never peer reviewed, it was never replicated, and it did not control for confounding variables. Opposingly, today you also heard testimony from a representative of the defendant, Lush Fertilizer CEO Blake Doncourt. Blake Doncourt explained that her company took every possible measure to ensure the safety and efficacy of her product. After several toxicology tests, the team found nothing warranting further safety warnings or baking. The Environmental Protection Agency, an independent government agency, agreed. Skylar Weirs and Dr. Devin Williams corroborated this testimony, concluding that Lush Fertilizer is actually the safest product on the market. Opposing counsel has claimed that this actually limits exposure to Drufo, which makes it much safer for both humans and the environment because it needs to be used in much smaller quantities due to its chemical bonding abilities. This also means that it's extremely unlikely that out of the multitude of agricultural products that Dakota would have worked with at Haven Landscaping, Lush Fertilizer caused the illness because Dakota would have been exposed to it at much lower levels than any other product. The plaintiff has talked to you a lot today about greed and has claimed that Blake Doncourt is motivated by capital over compassion, but they haven't actually proven a causational relationship or any degree of medical probability. And this is definitively untrue, as Blake Doncourt donates profits to prevent environmental degradation. As you can see on Exhibit 8, Lush made millions in profits, even with calculated expenses. The plaintiff has also said that Lush is careless because of a typo on their package. You should do a gut check here. The typo on one fertilizer label doesn't equate to an accusation of gross negligence. The burden of proof in this case is by the preponderance of evidence, more likely than not. It is the plaintiff's responsibility to prove that the defendant manufactured fertilizer with Drufo, that the defendant was negligent, that the plaintiff was reasonably expected to use the product, and that the plaintiff's damages were caused by the defendant's negligence. The plaintiff has not met that burden today. The defendant was not negligent, but proactive. The plaintiff was not expected to use the product. This simply elucidates that Dakota Weirs is going after the wrong company. Haven Landscaping, which failed to enforce proper safety protocols amongst its child employee, is the party that should be held responsible. Throughout the plaintiff's off-key, assumptive logic, irrational and unreliable purportedly scientific claims, and blatant bias and opportunism, it is clear that they have not met their burden. We ask you not to ruin the image of a benevolent company that produces a fundamentally safe and ethical product, a company that even donates revenue to charity and sets a precedent in the industry for environmental protection. Thus, we ask you, the jury, to render a verdict in favor of Lush Fertilizer. Thank you.
Do you have a rebuttal? Thank you, Ms. Cook. Do you have a rebuttal, Mr. Dar?
Yes, Your Honor.
You may proceed.
Now, every point that the defense has brought up in their closing directly contradicts what has been brought to you during these testimonies. They claim Carson did no research regarding this, while through her testimony, it was obvious that she took a major part. They also claim Carson was clearly biased against the defendant, Blake Doncourt, while Carson claims that Blake was like a parent to her. The defense claims that it's never been disproven that Drufo is it's never been proven that Drufo is carcinogenic, but just as much, it hasn't been disproven that Drufo is carcinogenic through Skylar Weirs' testimony. They also say that the other agricultural products at Haven were more likely responsible for this. Yet Skylar clearly says that she has no idea on whether or not these other agricultural products could have caused this cancer. Thank you. No further. That's the end of my rebuttal.
Thank you, Mr. Dar. Thank you both for your presentations today. Let's go ahead and give the scorekeepers a couple minutes to finish their scorekeeping and submit their scores. As panelists, if you could turn on your videos once you have submitted your scores, then we can proceed with any commentary at the end.
All right, so we did receive all 3 of the score sheets, so we can go ahead and get started. You are muted, Judge.
Thank you. There was some banging in my house, so if that interrupted anybody, I apologize. That's why I put myself on mute again. Amanda, I can't see you. I wanted to make sure that you're still there. But I wanted to, okay. Excellent. Thank you. You are on mute.
I thought I was too dark and I was like, maybe it's just my computer screen, but
yeah. No. Okay. Well, mine is dark too, because my light is in the wrong spot in my office. So I apologize for that as well. So it's like I'm there with a bouncing head. That's it. Okay. First of all, my name is Elsa Martinez Tenredo, as you can see on the screen. I am a judge with the Office of Administrative Courts. Before I became a judge, I was a pre-hearing judge that did merit discovery issues and motions practice, as well as a settlement conference judge. Prior to that, I practiced for 28 years doing litigation. But that's not what brings me here. I just wanted to give you a little background so that you know where I'm coming from. What brings me here is I have been involved in some way or the other in this mock trial program since 1995. When Colorado did nationals here in Colorado. None of you were around, or at least the team members. I'm doubtful even the panelists were probably around, because you look young too. But it's been a long time. And both the Colorado Bar Association and the Denver Bar Association do such a fabulous job at putting this together. When I started, I was handed over a book, and I was one of the volunteers to, put the panels together, and, so we didn't have the technology that we have today. So it's the scope of mock trials has changed incredibly, and they do such a wonderful job. So first of all, I'd like to give a hand to both the Denver and the Colorado Bar Association for doing such a terrific job and giving the teams such a great opportunity to participate in this kind of wonderful programming. So congratulations to them. Next, by the way, I'd like to see all the team members. Could you turn on your videos? Thank you. I guess I just assumed you eventually would all be on here. Next, I'd like to say both teams did really well. I'm always so impressed by the quality of your work ethics, your professionalism, how well the teams are prepared and perform. So it's just such a pleasure to be able to preside over this kind of quality programming, because I get to see young people that just do a beautiful job and have such commitment to the craft that you are performing. So, and I do hope that you go on to potentially careers as lawyers, and if not actors. My goodness, some of the acting was really superb. So I just wanted to congratulate. There was some really great moments that I thought were very good. Charlie, you did a great job with your acting. It was really fabulous. So I wanted to give you that kudos. Miss Avera, you were the only, I've done all the trials today. You were the only one that had the foresight to admit into evidence the CV. I didn't see that in any of the other trials. There were, boy, so many moments, and I'm going to go ahead and cede the floor to the panelists so that they can introduce themselves and give you some feedback as well. But I think you all did a terrific job. So, Mr. Lowe, if I may call you William, how about you first up?
Yeah, hi guys. My name is William Lowe, and I'm a recent graduate of Washburn Law in Topeka, Kansas, and a new attorney here in Colorado. I'm going to keep it pretty brief because I know it's been a long day for everybody. I just wanted to take a short moment to say I really enjoyed watching you guys perform today. Each and every one of you did a fantastic job, and it was apparent how much time and energy you guys put into this. It really was a joy to watch, and I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you. Good job.
Amanda, would you go next?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't take notes because we were told in the orientation that there might not be critiques at the end, but I'm Amanda. I work at the CDLE with Division of Labor Standards. I'm a compliance investigator. I do willfulness work, so mostly like more of an adjudicatory role than actually litigating. But yeah, you guys are all amazing. I was like sitting there texting my fiance, and I was like, either kids are so well prepared or these kids are some of the best, because I was not nearly this prepared when I did high school, like even college mock trial. You guys' grasp on the rules and objections, the timing of them, it was good. You guys make me excited. So you guys should all be great. And also, Mr. Dar, the way you never said, "Is that right?" or correct on cross-examination, I can't do that. I still can't do that. I just have to say it. And it was like really great the way that you just left a declarative sentence. It felt like really nice. So yeah, great job, guys.
And
Hi guys.
Mr. Riley. Or
I'll
Cody.
go last.
Thank
I'm
you.
a pretty recent graduate of BU Law here in Denver, and I work at Robinson and Henry now. I'm a civil litigator. I primarily do intellectual property, so trademark, copyright, and patents. I was in your guys' shoes not too long ago, and so if anybody wants to reach out or has any questions about what I did in undergrad and how I made it through law school or anything like that, I would definitely applaud you to send an email. You can find me just at robinsonandhenry.com. Everyone did wonderful. I think I gave the highest points to those who I felt weren't reading from the screen and those who had some passion in their voices. So good job, everyone.
And again, thank you all for being part of this competition. I wish you the best. I know that I'll probably see some of you at state. So good luck and have a great evening. You're done. Great job.
Thank you so much.
Before we all go, does anybody have any questions either of the panelists, of each other, or of me? You're ready to be done for the day, aren't you? It's been a long day.
I'd just like to thank this team. You guys were really fun to compete against, and you brought up points we hadn't seen. So thank you for competing with us.
Yeah, thank y'all. You were really amazing. This was a really fun round and a great round. So thank you.
And I agree with that. Some of the points that were brought up in this round were I didn't, and not just one point, it was multiple points. So both of you did a great job. So congratulations. Good luck going on to state. and have a good evening. Take care.
Have a good evening.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thank you so much.
And thank you to all the volunteers. You are so helpful. Thank you so much.
Oh, Ashley, we're done.
I know, we did it.
That's great. Thank you so much, Ashley. You guys do great. I'm always impressed. Last year, I wasn't very impressed. This year, I'm even more impressed because of how smoothly things are going. Just wow.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Yeah,
And we
great
appreciate you
work.
coming back every year.
Well, when I started, we didn't have all this around. So it was, it's been a change. It's certainly been a change from, and